Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. For our final segment of today's show, like I said before the break, we are moving from the Euros to the Copa America tournament taking place right here in the US of A. Should be a fantastic tournament, but we are going to be looking like we did with the Euros. We're going to be looking at the Golden Boot candidates and betting favorites for the Copa America coming up in a couple of weeks. So without further ado, let's get into the final segment of today's show. Coming in at the number 5 position is a player who I really think that is benefiting from that front line that he is in Brazil, Rodrigo at plus 800. Obviously, not the best domestic campaign for Rodrigo, as he only scored 10 goals in 34 games for Real Madrid. Kind of disappointing in the Champions League final as well. But in this Brazilian squad, I think he's one of the dominant players. He obviously is in a front line that allows him to get that level of production needed in a Golden Boot winner. So we'll have to see how he develops there. But overall, at number 5, I kind of think it might be a little bit too high. There are guys below him like Luis Diaz, who I'm really excited to see. Obviously won the Golden Boot in a tie with the top guy in this list. Hint, hint there. So Rodrigo at number 5 is kind of weird to me because of the fact this was not his best domestic season. We'll have to see how it translates internationally. I do think this Brazilian squad can really help elevate his game. But I think that Rodrigo, for now, I'm kind of going to fade. Another guy who I think I'm going to fade at number 4 is Darwin Nunez at plus 600. In a Uruguay squad who I can no longer rely upon as much as when Luis Suarez and Edinson Cavani were there. Now Darwin Nunez, a player who really hasn't had as much domestic success as people thought of him. Moving from Benfica to Liverpool, it hasn't really developed for him. I think that right now, Darwin Nunez is in that period of his career where he really needs to elevate his game before he falls to the wayside like a Liverpool striker of the past, like Fernando Torres or so. But in Uruguay's system, I definitely feel like he can be a reliable source. It's just that I don't necessarily trust him to score as many goals as people think in this tournament, because of the fact that Uruguay doesn't necessarily have the players to help Darwin Nunez's game elevate. So at number 4, I think I'm going to fade him at plus 600. I don't really see him as an attractive betting odd favorite there. But coming in at number 3, I definitely see this guy really making an impact at Copa America in terms of goal scoring ability. Julian Alvarez at plus 550 had a fantastic 22 World Cup in an Argentina squad made to spread the love around in terms of goal scoring production. I think in a squad where you have so many different creative, flourish players that can help players score goals, a really unselfish team play is what got them to that 22 title. So look for Julian Alvarez to be one of those players at the Copa America who scores goals in bunches. Obviously, I think he's underutilized at Manchester City, and I think that will kind of show in the first couple of games of this tournament as he tries to settle into that Argentinian squad. But at the end of this Copa America tournament, when I fully expect Argentina to at least make the final, expect Julian Alvarez to be high up on this thing. So I think I'm going to buy into this kind of betting odds favorite for Julian Alvarez. Coming in at number 2, another guy who I think is going to be the better guy in this Brazilian squad lineup, Vini Jr. at plus 380. He had a fantastic domestic campaign, and it's reflected in him being the Ballon d'Or favorite for this upcoming season. So Vini Jr. in this Brazilian front line is going to be the guy who is going to get the most goals. I think he's going to be the penalty taker as well. So look for him to score goals in bunches. I think that he will be the star of the Copa America tournament as he is preparing to win the Ballon d'Or. So yes, I think at number 2, he is a very high value pick and one of the safer bets, but not as safe a bet as the number 1 overall player on this list in Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi, obviously as good as gold in terms of these Golden Boot awards. He won the last Golden Boot award at Copa America the last time around in a plus 330. He's a fantastically safe bet to win this award in an Argentina system that I really think will be one of the most fun teams to watch in this tournament. We saw what they did at 22 World Cup, where they didn't necessarily rely on Leo Messi as much as they did in the past. That could hurt him, but I still think in this system is Messi, 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 and I think that he will be the focus of this entire squad. But in terms of dark horses, like I said before, I think that a player, if you're looking to buy a high-risk, high-reward kind of player, I do think that it will ultimately be Luis Diaz of Colombia. Obviously, Colombia is not one of the preeminent teams in this tournament, but Luis Diaz is definitely one of the players. His pace, his ability on the ball, can cut and shoot. I think that he is going to be one player to watch in this tournament. Obviously, he shared the Golden Boot award with Lionel Messi at the last Copa America, so I do think that he is kind of being underestimated here. Another guy who I'm looking at, how about Christian Pulisic? I think that Christian Pulisic definitely deserves to be in the top 5 in terms of betting odds. He had a fantastic domestic season moving from Chelsea to AC Milan. I think he's found his footing finally in Europe. Fantastic to see an American player doing so well over there, and I think he will have nothing short of an amazing tournament as the US prepares for in 2 years' time to host the World Cup. Christian Pulisic will be one of the faces of that movement. And another player who's kind of getting up there in years, but is a player on a Mexico squad who really needs to look for the goal-scoring production in this tournament, in Hirving Lozano, Chucky Lozano, to kind of be that leader of this Mexico squad who really doesn't necessarily threaten me or scare me on paper, but Chucky Lozano is definitely going to be one of those players who, no matter how Mexico performs in this tournament, will score goals, because I just think he's a fantastic player. He's been doing this for Mexico for many years. Another player who I think is kind of definitely underrated in this tournament is Weston McKennie. I think that Weston McKennie is not necessarily known for his goal-scoring ability, but in a USA midfield that's definitely young and upcoming, I do believe that Weston McKennie will be able to get some goals in this tournament. Maybe not as much as a Golden Boot Award winner, but I think that he is kind of one of those dark horse options to do that. And last but not least, we'll stick with the USA and go with a guy in Folarin Balogun, who I think the US are very fortunate to have at the striker position. Obviously, he could have gone anywhere in the world. He could have picked England, he could have picked France, I believe. But he chose the USA, and it should reflect in his abilities to score goals in bunches. We will have to see how he develops in this tournament, and if he is going to be entrusted as the striker to lead USA into this more promising era for them. But that should just about do it for this show. I loved talking about the GOATs, even though I didn't have the graphics up, and I love that I get to talk more and more about soccer as these tournaments come up. I loved also talking about these conference finalists in the NBA who are very surprising, and the stalwarts in the NHL. So overall, I hope you really like this show. Do remember to like, follow, and subscribe if you like this show as well. But I'm really excited as we end this week to be able to have this show that is kind of the calm before the storm before I get into more finals content. So yes, I really am excited to see what the future holds for the show as we get into more and more of summer sports. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I've been Chris Shepard of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always with the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. I will see you guys tomorrow for another great show, special guests on the show as well. So it should be a good one. We will be back tomorrow better than ever.